Good evening and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host, Marie Kato. So there is a sense of momentum and a boost of Ukrainian attacks on Russia. This is what is leading the way for a season of summits focused on Ukraine. The question is how much more European support is needed to bring peace to Ukraine. The latest number is $20 billion to support the other streams of financing. To talk about recent developments, we are joined by Olena Lennon, Assistant Professor at the Department of National Security at the University of New Haven. Hello, and thank you for joining us.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
So we hear that Kyiv wants to make Russia burn and wants to raise $20 billion by the NATO summit in Ankara. Do you think that this figure is realistic? And I'm referring to actually raising the money. And also I wanted to ask about whether you think that everyone, all the countries involved, will feel as strongly about financing this war in this amount.
Well, it's definitely a good ask, and it's a good window of opportunity for Ukraine because Ukraine has demonstrated an ability to impose the so-called medium and long-range sanctions on Russia more effectively than the economic sanctions in the past 14 years. So I think Ukraine is able to demonstrate its success rate in actually raising the cost of the war on Russia and degrading Russia's combat and economic power. It's not lost on Ukraine's European partners that Ukraine is the only country and the only military that's currently able to actually engage Russia on military front, on economic front, and political front. So, and actually impose some real pain and the cost of the war. So whether it's realistic, probably not. But I think Ukraine's goal is to move from ad hoc, temporary, mechanisms of financing Ukraine's defenses to something more sustainable, more long-term, that it will allow Ukraine to plan and sustain the current pace of operations, because Ukraine is unable to continue this war effort without knowing exactly how much money will have available to them, ammunition, drones, personnel, etc. So it's good to be at the top of the agenda. So Ukraine is just trying to set the agenda and to highlight to its European partners that they need Ukraine and Ukraine's capabilities as much as Ukrainians themselves.
So now Ukraine is, in some ways, I suppose, officially on track to EU membership. It's officially opened its chapters. Obviously, there are some disparities, I suppose, discussions about what kind of status Ukraine will have. But nonetheless, do you think that now that it is on this route to Brussels, do you think that it will be perceived differently when it asks for financial support?
I don't think that it will be perceived differently because, again, Europeans are well aware of the fact that it is now on them to provide the brunt of the burden for Ukraine's defense needs, given that the U.S. is, distancing itself, and the most recent proposal or request from the White House for defense needs did not include support for Ukraine, even though it has, the defense budget has gone up, but the most recent version does not include Ukraine. Now, it is now contested in the American Congress, but nonetheless, the decision has not been made here in the U.S. whether there will be assistance to Ukraine. So Europeans are, clear-eyed about the fact that the burden sharing is now almost entirely on them, and that Ukraine's request for assistance is not only for Ukraine's defensive needs, but also for European security. So I think that the context of the recent escalations in drone warfare between Russia and Ukraine, also, escalations, not just escalations and attacks, not just on Ukrainian civilians, but also on the front line. And while the advances on the ground are slow, there's still, the battle is still ongoing. But also now with Ukraine more successfully hitting Russian energy infrastructure deep inside Russia creates some real escalation cycles that make Europeans worried about the so-called spillover effect. So I think the context of the ongoing escalation in the war and the fact that the U.S. is bogged down in Iran and it's Trump's attention has shifted even more so toward Middle East creates a very realistic picture for Europeans that they have to contribute more and they have to produce more, and that Ukraine's request is not far-fetched.
Here in Europe this past week, I don't know what it's like in the US, there is a definite change. People say the tide has shifted. There's a different sense of momentum for Ukraine, that there is reinforced energy, and Ukraine wants to take advantage of it. It's completely understandable in terms of reinforcing its resources to keep attacking Russia. And I wanted to ask you, in light of everything that we've been talking about, and obviously the news that I'm sure that you follow, how long do you think that this will be sustainable?
Not long, as we have seen in even in the last 4 years, the character of war is such that with every adaptation, there's a counter adaptation. So Ukraine currently is enjoying a momentum where they have a temporary advantage in drone warfare. They have also been able to deploy their homemade missiles, Flamingo, reaching as far from the border as 900 kilometers. So but the Russians are adapting to that. As we have seen in the last 4 years, the adaptation cycle has been very fast moving, both between Russian and Ukrainian forces. So, and Ukrainians know that every time they come up with a new tactic or they receive a new capability, it has an immediate effect, and Ukraine is able to enjoy a temporary advantage, but then the Russians adapt. So we should fully expect that the Russians will improve their air defenses, they will improve their counter-drone capabilities. Already we have seen the Russians putting up more of their Pantsir air defense towers around populated urban centers as they're adapting to the intensity of Ukrainian attacks. So as you know, this is just the nature of war. With every advantage and adaptation comes counter-adaptation. And that's precisely why Ukraine is now pressing on, because they have experience with the Russians suffering from a new capability or advantage, but then quickly adapting to it. And I think we should expect that the Russians will continue building defenses to deny Ukraine an ability to exert this amount of pressure. So unfortunately, there is a very small window that Ukraine is trying to take advantage of. And I think that the Europeans should meet Ukraine where it is in terms of the tempo and urgency of operations.
In terms of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, there's a meeting that is scheduled for June 18th in Brussels. What are your expectations of that meeting in terms of developments, any decisions that might be made?
Right. I think that the conversation will be dominated by air defense, by building and delivering more air defense missiles and counter drone capabilities to Ukraine, expanding European industrial capacity, producing more ammunition, producing more air defense missiles. But I think that this is more of the same, obviously. But the conversation now is how to scale it up faster. Given that the U.S., is expected to continue providing intelligence and is expected to continue selling weapons to Ukraine, but still not enough to where Ukraine can actually sustain this escalation from Russia. So I think where the conversation is going to be headed at the Ukraine Defense Contact Group is in moving from ad hoc this emergency responses to long-term planning and making sure that Ukraine has long-term sustainable support and assistance that does not depend on political changes so much, that does not depend on where the wind blows politically in European capitals, that will allow Ukrainian military to plan and execute operations, because without knowing what exactly they will have long term, no military can be successful. So I think that's where the conversation will be moving at the meeting in Brussels next week, is long-term planning.
Okay, and then what about the G7 summit that is starting next week? We have a lot of summits going on, and like you say, more of the same in perhaps slightly different formats. You say that Russia is recalibrating. You are very realistic in suggesting that essentially Russia is readapting, and that the momentum that we see isn't all that sustainable. So what do you think may actually happen this summer?
Well, it's good that the conversations are happening, and it's good to keep Ukraine on the agenda. It's all, again, it's all part of the pressure, right? It's not just diplomatic pressure or just economic pressure. It's all hands on deck approach. The G7 summit obviously is significant because of the US's involvement, and as far as I know, President Trump indicated his intention to meet with President Zelensky in the Ukraine dialogue. So that's all good attention for Ukraine. Now, unfortunately, there have not been any indications suggesting that that Trump might, in fact, change his policy toward military aid for Ukraine, or redelivering or rediverting air defense to Ukraine, because he is still bogged down in the Strait of Hormuz, and I expect that that will dominate conversations at the G7 level. Energy shortages worldwide, demining Strait of Hormuz to alleviate pressure on the supply, on oil suppliers. So again, at that level, I think Ukraine may not necessarily be at the top of the G7 agenda, as the world is, currently still dealing with the oil shortages. But it's still a good platform for Ukraine to remind its global partners that the Russia-Ukraine war is a global war. And that pressure on Russia needs to be sustained, because Russia is the main disruptor of oil supplies and global stability and security. So Ukraine is part of the global conversation, but again, I doubt that the Strait of Hormuz will take a second place to Ukraine's air defense needs. Realistically speaking.
But based on that, are you suggesting that essentially Europe will become the negotiating vessel to assist Ukraine, hoping, as we hope, that we can get Russia to the negotiating table?
I don't think Europe has a choice. Europe has to be at the negotiating table, because this is about European security. And this is about having an aggressive state or a terrorist state, really, on their borders. So especially with the most recent incursions of Russian drones into NATO airspace, and some of those drones landing, as was the case with Romania. So I think the danger, the threat for Europe is not hypothetical. It's not in the future. It's here. It's happening. The war is escalating, so Europeans just don't have a choice. They must be in the driving seat of this conversation, and whether they will be negotiating, I think the Europeans absolutely have to be at the negotiating table, but not as mediators, as was suggested by Russia, but as active participants and parties to this war that are also affected by Russia's aggression. So Europe is not neutral in this war. Europe has its own defense and security interests that are completely aligned with security of Ukraine.
We'll have to end our conversation there, but it's been great speaking to you. Olena Lennon, Assistant Professor at the Department of National Security at the University of New Haven. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And that's all we have for you right now on World Talks. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you very soon on TVP World. Goodbye.